with a moment of reflection. This is from E. E. Cummings, and it begins in this way. I begin in this way. I thank you, God, I thank God for most this amazing day, for the leaping of greenly spirits of trees and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great happening, illuminating earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of nothing, human, merely being, doubt, unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. And so with that, I'll say amen.
Amen.
So thank you for joining us on our Tuesday Cultural Competency, Anti-Racism, Province 1 web discussions, I call them. And for today, we have James McKim from the Diocese of New Hampshire talking to us about practical ways to have conversations across difference. We hope that you, if you've missed some of our conversations, that you'll find them on the Province 1 website. We hope that you will join us in the future as we are already planning for what we'll do on the next third Tuesdays of the month. So James, take it away.
Well, thank you, Karen, and welcome to everyone. It's good to see the number of you whom I know, and certainly good to meet those of you whom I do not know. I think this is a great opportunity for us to carry forward and carry out the General Convention resolutions, which are really asking us to enter into conversation about our differences and an effort to do some healing and some racial reconciliation. And what we look to do here in New Hampshire, and we're hoping that others will as well, is couch this set of resolutions in the Jesus movement, and looking at every individual as being unique and being treating everyone with dignity and respect, which is our baptismal covenant, as the way to break down our barriers and our differences and appreciate the diversity and benefit from the diversity that is around us. So as Karen said, and as you've seen in the announcement for this webcast, we're going to be talking about practical ways to have conversations around difference. And so we in New Hampshire have developed, and I've developed 2 tools to facilitate those conversations. And so I'd like to review those tools with you so that you can get a sense of what tools you might use in your efforts to facilitate and hold those conversations. And certainly looking for your thoughts as to ways to enhance what we have already built and maybe to add on or create your own recipe, as we call it, for conversations. So what I'm sharing with you on the screen now is our facilitated outline for what we call EGADs, our Episcopal Gathering Diversity Dinners, Get Acquainted Dinners. And we have kind of two flavors of this, and I'm sharing with you what we call the long-term planning event flavor, which lasts for 2 hours, and the concept here is really simple. It's a dinner. It's simply a dinner where we invite people to share a meal and a conversation. And it's a guided conversation. And so the flow, the logistics for this are described in this recipe document, which we make available through our church, our diocesan website. So the setup is very straightforward. We look for several weeks ahead of time of our event for the host to invite 6 to 40 people. And looks like we've got some movement of the slide here. Let me see if I can fix this. All right. Looks like it's moving with my cursor, so I'll just leave my cursor up there. So invite 6 to 14 people from your church and from your community, representing a spectrum of ages, outlooks, and races, cultural backgrounds, a diverse set of people. One way to use this is to just hold general conversation. Another way to use this is if there is a particular group of people who seem to be challenged in relating to one another. This can be a tool that can be used to help them also to simply get to know one another, because it's in that getting to know one another that barriers are broken down, that differences seem to disappear.
So James, this could be as simply as a vestry or any other group that works together but finds that there's some challenges in talking together.
That's correct. That's correct. Absolutely correct. So once you're at the event date and time, or a little bit before the event date and time, you want to arrange tables so that they're facing the front of the room, and you may want to have a flip chart at the front of the room, or you may not. It all depends on whether you want to capture what's being said. And remembering all along that this is a really a great potluck opportunity to have people bring something that they like or that may represent their culture, their heritage, or their background. And we let people know that this is going to be a conversation while we're eating. It's perfectly fine to talk with food in your mouth. We're trying to not put restrictions on the event and really make it feel like it's just a dinner that a lot of people are having conversations around. We do try to sprinkle a few hymnals around the room, a few books of common prayer, a Bible or so for reference. And you can ignore this line about the diversity survey. That's something that we've done in New Hampshire, and you may choose to do a diversity survey of your own to get a sense of how people feel about the diversity in your diocese. And if you'd like to see the survey that we put out, let me know, and I'll certainly send it to you. So we have this recipe in steps. Once everyone's there, we welcome everyone and provide an overview of what's going to happen for the next couple of hours. We explain the reason for the gathering. We explain that it's going to be about 2 hours worth of dinner. And with that, we open with a prayer, as is customary. And we then talk a bit about topics. And as I said, this is a somewhat guided conversation. And to guide that conversation, help guide that conversation, we have a couple of graphics that are developed. The first one is what I call the diversity continuum. And it shows on the left-hand side dealing with people in a detrimental fashion, and on the right-hand side dealing with people in a beneficial fashion. And it's a way to talk about how we interact with people. And so everything from if you denounce someone who's different from you, then you're in a detrimental kind of relationship. And as you move along the continuum, if you simply hate people but you don't actively denounce them, then you're still in a detrimental kind of mindset and behavior. If you just ignore someone, well, that's not as bad as hating them or denouncing them, but that's still not quite being as beneficial or taking the diversity of individuals as beneficially as you might. You can tolerate people, and as we move across, you get to appreciate and respect. That's great. You're headed in the right direction. Let's see from the back here. Where we want to be is engaging with people in a positive fashion, understanding who they are, what makes them tick. And with that kind of context for behaviors, we get into more discussion. We let people have discussion on their own for a bit. And you might structure this so you talk about the continuum for 10 minutes or so, have people ask questions about it, then go off to break up into small groups. You might have them break up into small groups and talk amongst themselves and ask a few questions, such as, we have a handout here that I'm actually going to share with you in a couple of minutes that'll go through, that you can give out to folks so they can follow along with this guide. The other graphic we use is what you see here, and hopefully folks recognize what this graphic is.
So James, what kinds of questions come up at these points at your dinners? What do people say, or what's your experience?
Well, what people have said during this conversation, this part of the conversation, is that they've never really thought about, get back down there, they've never really thought about this in a kind of behavioral overview perspective. They've never really thought about the fact that ignoring someone who's different from you is not really as beneficial as celebrating them or engaging with them in a positive way. And so what also comes up is, well, how do I engage somebody in a positive way? People have many fears about engaging people who are different than they are. And that's really what another aspect of the dinner, of inviting people who are different, with different backgrounds and different cultures. You're sharing a meal, and that provides a bit of commonality right there and then. You're sharing a meal in a specific space, where you can have a conversation about that meal, about what's in front of you.
That's what Jesus did, right? He ate and drank with people who were different than he was, and invited those who were different than the host to sit around the table. So I think it's a very sacred and common event.
Right, right. And again, we're just providing some food for thought, right? Some topics of conversation, a guided dinner. So in step 2, you can actually see some of the questions we have people ask amongst themselves during the dinner. Discuss with the person next to you what meal did you look forward to when during the holidays when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah.
And let's see, moving along here. Here we go. Another topic is, what do all people need or want besides food to survive? And remember, we're looking at the actual guide that the host uses, so they would not have these answers in front of them. This is for them to have a conversation with people next to them, or you might put them into a group and say, everybody talk about this question for 5 minutes. Talk about these questions for the next 5 minutes. Hopefully what they'll come around to, is, especially if you're asking that second question, what do all people need or want besides food? Well, that brings us to discussion of Maslow's hierarchy. And we can start from the bottom, and I ask people, who has seen this before? Who knows what this is? And invariably somebody will say what it is. They'll say it's the Maslow's hierarchy. And you can get someone else to explain it. Engage people in the conversation by asking them to take a leadership role in the conversation, or at least to say something, to share their knowledge, share what they know, so that you're not always the only one talking, but B, it makes everyone feel like they can also speak up and contribute to the conversation. So if we look at Maslow's hierarchy, we ask the question, who can provide us what we need to progress up Maslow's hierarchy? Well, physiologically, God has given us, through nature and through the environment, pretty much all those things that you see in the physiological level. He gives us many of the things alone in the safety level, but you start seeing some of those things that only others can give us. So employment. Well, in some sense you can say we employ ourselves, but if you think about the world of work, to get a paycheck, someone has to employ you. Or even if you're on your own, you're doing work for someone else. If you look at the next level, love and belonging, friendship, family, and sexual intimacy, all those things only someone else can give you. You can't give those to yourself. At the esteem level, the same thing. You can't give those to yourself. At the self-actualization level, those are all in the context of community. So as Maslow says, we all strive for self-actualization, and we actually go through these levels every day. So if we all strive for self-actualization every day, we start off by just getting out of bed and breathing. We then look to make sure we're secure, we're healthy. On up the hierarchy, we realize as we start talking through this, and people have said, I didn't realize how much I rely on others for my health and well-being and my happiness.
So this is part of the table conversation, is what you're saying?
Yes, this is absolutely part of the table conversations. Sometimes I'll have the first question be done in a small group, and then I'll bring the group back to the big group to talk about the next question and to talk about the hierarchy. Okay. And I've given some references and timings there, but you can feel free to structure it however you want. If you have more than 2 hours, then you can give more time for discussion and for the questions. You can see it's just sorry, go ahead, Karen.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to ask you, so what have been your experiences, of this practice, transformational or things that surprised you?
For me, it's been a wonder seeing people talk about and hearing people talk about these questions and these topics. It's shown me that we approach things as individuals so differently, yet we're all yearning to be heard, and we're all yearning to be accepted. And there was one event that we had at St. Paul's in Concord where one person really opened up and shared their philosophy on life. And it was gratifying to me that through this tool we were able to create an environment where she felt comfortable expressing some sentiments that it was obvious were held up, were bottled up inside. And she actually, and the group who were there, were not strangers to one another. They actually knew one another very well, but they had never heard her speak about the philosophy that she has in life in the way that she had. And there were some tears because she was saying some things that were pretty controversial. But afterwards, everyone was really glad that they had the opportunity to have the conversations that they had because they felt much closer as people in the parish. They felt they knew one another much better than they had ever known each other before, and most of them had known each other for many years. There were some new folks in the group as well, but some of them had known each other for many, many years. So that was really gratifying to see.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to go through the rest of this. You can read this yourself. We really look for people to have the conversations. We ask if there is a set of actions that people want to take or hope to take with their newfound insights. And I will sometimes end with asking them to share what those newfound insights and what those actions are that they plan to take with their newfound insights. And they generally share what those desired actions are. And I encourage that because, as we've already shown, we need each other to self-actualize. And we can help each other achieve those things that we say that we want to achieve with our newfound insights. And we can only do that if we know what those insights and what those desired actions are. What you'll see at the bottom of the slides here, the recipe here is a place to write down those actions. If you want to create an action plan as a parish or as a group, you can certainly write those actions down as a group and identify maybe when you want to achieve those actions, or don't write it down. Just keep things in your own head. It's totally up to the individuals and the group, and it's been a conversation. If nothing happens, but they have the conversation and gain some insights and get to know each other a little better, that, in my mind, is success. Because you've had the conversation, you've allowed people you created an environment where people could have that conversation. So that's the EGAD.
So James, I have another question for you, and that is, have you experienced like EGAD being a springboard for other engagement around difference?
We have experienced where the EGAD has been a springboard for another EGAD. People want to continue the conversation. They want to bring others into the conversation and they want to use this as a way to get to know other people in the parish. So that's one springboard that I've seen. Another is that we've done a couple of these and had the request that we do a church-wide, diocesan-wide version. And so we actually did, we have a church in the woods in Canterbury, New Hampshire, where we did a picnic. And the picnic was, we didn't quite follow this outline, but it was conversations from with people all across the diocese, and we called it our first annual diversity gathering, diocesan diversity gathering, and we're looking to have future gatherings in the same Church of the Woods in the future. So more springboard from the EGADs that we've held.
That's great. To the listeners, the participants, do you have questions?
And did our notes tab disappear?
I think so.
Let's see if I can bring it back. I think it was 49. I'm going to hide this a minute and see if I can't find that and bring it back up. There we go, 49.
So there
it is.
Yeah.
Where can we find the EGAD? So let me actually type in where you can find it. We have it on our NewHampshireEpiscopal.org website. And I think I just put it in. And we'll also, it is also accessible from the Province 1 site. In our set of resources around diversity. So we have a number of questions being typed in. Let me see if we can get to some of these. how do you find a community of diversity? My congregation is all white. So this is another piece to the puzzle that you can have a conversation about. And I'm going to ask right now, what is diversity? Feel free to just chime in or type in, what is diversity?
So I would say, this is Karen. You might think that it's racial, but it may not. That may not be the only, the most critical thing. So it's people working across difference, really. And how do we work across difference? Whether it's class, whether it's race, whether it's gender. And we hope that these conversations and tools will help us begin to walk that bridge, so that we have some ways of engaging others.
And that's the point that we're trying to make. And if you look at the top of the recipe here, we're suggesting you're inviting people representing a spectrum of ages, outlooks, races, cultural backgrounds. When we say diversity, we're not just using that to mean black and white. We're using it to mean the full spectrum of humanity. So I would be willing to bet that you can find the full spectrum of humanity in Rhode Island. And really, what I believe the difference in what we're doing is that we are taking Jesus' teachings, we're taking the Jesus movement and applying it to benefiting from diversity. Okay? So Jesus didn't say, I'm just going to deal with, well, he didn't say they didn't use black people back in the day, but he didn't just say, I'm going to deal with one race or one type of people. He said, the way that I want you to behave is respecting the dignity of every human being.
And dignity is part of our baptismal covenant for Episcopalians.
Exactly. So there's more typing going on, yes, but we do find discussing the diversity that exists amongst ourselves. Safe zoner, I'm not sure what that's coming out to be.
Okay, can I talk?
Yes. Go ahead.
I give up on typing because when multiple people are typing at the same time, that's how it
Yeah.
gets all screwed up.
Right.
One of the things that we did in our church is we did some safe zone training with the LGBTQ group at the University of Rhode Island, and we found that that was a very, very enlightening thing. And even though you have a congregation of all white people, I can guarantee you that there may be some people that are uncomfortable discussing sexual orientation. So that is another diversity issue that the Episcopal Church has been facing, and as a matter of fact, all churches have been facing, including the Methodist Church this summer. So it's not always just an issue of color.
So thank you. I mean, it's an issue that the country is facing. Can you tell me can you identify yourself in the way that you'd like to?
Sorry, yeah, my name is Ann Ham, and I work with the Congregational Development Commission in Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges we face is the term diversity has come to be seen as a code word for anti-racism and racism in terms of blacks and whites. And we're trying to break that. We're trying to expand that definition so that everyone sees diversity for the spectrum of humanity. So, and it's through these conversations that we try to do that. And if you notice, when we went through the EGAD recipe, we weren't talking about black versus white. We were talking about just engaging each other as individuals in a conversation. Okay. Now, if we want to get into the more black versus white, the more racial reconciliation piece, we have another tool that we call the EPOPS, the Episcopal Power of Privilege Dinner. We have a guide for that, and that does speak more to racial reconciliation. It really explains about power of privilege to people who probably don't know about it. And what you realize out of that is that, well, it's not just black people who have suffered because of the power of privilege. Women, and when I introduce the topic of power of privilege, I actually say male power of privilege. And my wife, when I said that, said, I'm really glad you said that, because power of privilege has traditionally been for white males. Our systems, our institutions, our society is built around the power that white males have gained over time. And that power is over not just blacks, it's over anyone who's not a white male. So we try to have the same kind of safe environment and conversation around the power of privilege in a similar way that we have around just the get acquainted dinner. And that EPOP recipe is on the same site on the New Hampshire Episcopal .org page as the EGAD recipe is. I see the question, is there another way to have a chat log? And unfortunately, there is not a way to have a chat log that will only allow one person to type at a time. But we certainly want to encourage you trying, and if you want to raise your hand, you should have at the top of your screen a little person with a hand that is showing up. If you want to raise your hand, and maybe that's the way we can allow you to be the one to type, kind of take the totem, as they say, and the one with the totem is the one who can speak. The one with the token is the one who can speak. If you're a computer networks person, you know about the token ring as the network type, and you get this token, and you're the one who can speak. So you can try raising your hand if you want to be the one to type as well.
Yeah, raise your hand. We're excited about having your participation.
I'm curious, do folks feel that this is potentially a helpful tool, or gives you some insights into how to set up and host these conversations?
So James, when you say this, do you mean what you presented on the screen, or do you mean this this web discussion?
Well, we'll take both. Either. Certainly, I'm interested in hearing thoughts about the EGAD recipe and the tool that we put together. But and as you all are probably aware, I sit on the Province 1 Multicultural Task Force with Karen, and we certainly are interested in hearing what your thoughts are about the webcasts that we do, if they're helpful. And that might be an interesting question to ask. How many of you, can we see by show of hands, how many of you have participated in one of our webcasts previously? Okay, so we got a few people who've raised their hands. Good, good. Thank you for raising your hand there. So Bill's got his hand up again. Bill, did you want to grab the token, or was that just another hand up? Both hands down. All right, so I'm happy to also, if I guess we have a little bit more time, I can briefly share our EPOP recipe, so you can get a feel for that tool. Let me pull that up.
So I know that we're planning to do, this is Karen M. I know that we're planning to do a province-wide dinner. We're hoping that it'll be in Connecticut. So what would be your thoughts about preparing for such an event?
So what I would suggest is, as we said at the top here, we can identify a number of people from diverse ages, outlooks, races, cultural backgrounds, and ask them to bring a favorite dish of theirs, or something that is from their cultural heritage or that they feel a particular affinity to. And you, of course, need to schedule it far out enough in advance that people's schedule can allow them to actually make it. And it wants to be in a place where you can have a number of tables set up where the sharing of a meal can happen in a comfortable, informal way. So that's, in general, how I would prepare for one of these. And if you're, as I mentioned, in a parish where there are some people who are particularly having challenges relating to one another, interacting with one another, invite them. And invite them to bring their favorite meal. Use this as a way to have them engage in a conversation that does not have an agenda behind it, at least not from their perspectives, won't have an agenda behind it. Of course, our agenda is to get people talking, and knowing that just getting people talking about themselves, their likes and dislikes, allows them to open up and learn about each other. And you really need that personal rapport before you can tackle tough issues and disagreements. And I think we don't spend enough time really getting to know each other before we launch into trying to solve some problem that we might have between us. So we have Bettine typing, I know that you want diversity to be about things other than race, but the issue is that all white congregations know how to talk about diversity when it comes to politics, ethnic background, and even sexual orientation issues. I would say some do, some don't, but some do. So your mention about race is different and difficult in all white places. Remember, you're talking to a black man in the state of New Hampshire, which is one of the whitest places on earth, similar to Rhode Island. So for trying to get white people to have the conversation about race is challenging in that many of them have never experienced being with someone of a different race. They don't know, they don't feel an impact. They don't feel a need to have the conversation about race because it's not there in their community. They don't see the reason to have that conversation about race and racial reconciliation. And I would submit to you that if you're dealing with people who don't think outside of their community in the first place, then don't even try to have that conversation with them because they don't have a context in which to have that conversation. And they will not be ready to have that conversation. It's only when someone understands how the race issue impacts them personally that they'll be ready to have the conversation about it. Okay? So how can we make context available? So if you really want to get at the racial reconciliation piece, this is where the EPOP recipe comes in, the power of privilege. People don't understand the privilege that they have. And so the EPOP, and I can share it with you how we're doing on time. We've got a little bit of time here. The EPOP guy actually uses a number of videos to explain what white privilege is. So I can just share, and how, through a couple of questions that we ask, how that impacts people personally. And share, new share. Let me just bring this up.
Thank you, James.
My screen.
So a question I have for you, James, as you're working on this, I hope it's not a distraction. This is Karen. So how are you received when, as a man of African descent, and apparently you're going into mainly white spaces, how are you received by folks?
I think I'm received pretty well. I think that there are some people who are a bit standoffish because they've never seen an African American before. But in general, I think I've been pretty well received. I've not experienced a situation where I've been actively yelled at or asked to leave. But I'm not, having grown up in the South, I'm not naive enough to know that heads don't turn when I walk into a room. And I have that sixth sense, as many of us have, of when someone's staring at you just a little bit longer than they would stare at someone else. So that comes with the territory. I mean, we've grown up with that. It's second nature. And that's okay. And I chalk it up to, I'm simply different than what someone's seen before. And I have an outward appearance that is different. And it doesn't mean that I'm any less. It just means that I'm in a situation where someone is encountering me who's never encountered someone visibly like me before. And that's fine, as long as I keep that in mind. I'm fine with that. And you just have to go into those situations and start having the conversations. And if something good comes out of it, great. If something good doesn't come out of it, you've at least tried to have the experience, tried to have the conversation, tried to bring something to the table for that group and those people. All right, can you see my screen?
I can see it on the right as a little small screen.
A little small screen, okay. So what I have is, hopefully you can see the Facilitate outline from Benefiting from Diversity Through Eradicating White Privilege campaign. It's a mouthful. So this is set up in 2 sessions. We also do this in 1 session. So there are a number of videos that we have to explain what white privilege is and how it has impacted people in the United States over a few years. And we even have a video from a New Hampshire teacher who helped write the Common Core standards. And he admits that he helped write the Common Core standards in an effort to end white privilege that he saw even in New Hampshire, in lily white New Hampshire, as we might call it. So as you can see, we show the videos, and then we ask questions of the group. How does your job or daily activity perpetuate white privilege now that you know what it is? What are some of the things you can do in your daily life to be more tolerant of those different from you and those who don't enjoy white male privilege? And furthermore, how can you benefit from the changes that you make in your daily life, your daily activities? So this is what we use to have the conversations with those who may not have understood what white privilege is to begin with. Now, I would suspect that a huge question that you would ask now is, well, how do you even get people into the room to have this kind of a conversation using this tool? And that's an even tougher nut that I'm not sure we've really cracked just yet. Because as soon as you advertise that you're going to be talking about power and privilege, that turns people off, or they're certainly not going to listen to you. And many people don't listen to you until there's a situation where they're forced to talk about the topic. But what I'm trying to accomplish here in New Hampshire is to say to people, look, there's a benefit from dealing with this issue, a benefit to you personally. Your life is going to be more full. And this is what Jesus was teaching us. We live our lives most fully when we are engaged, when we are interacting with people who are different than we are. Just think about when you interact with someone, when you only interact with people who are just like you. That's a recipe for being bored much of the time, right? So the benefit of dealing with people who are different than you is your life is going to be full. You're following the Jesus movement. And I'm going to try to get my screen back so I can see if there are any comments, because I'm not seeing. There it is. There we go. So who's typing? Let's see.
I'm mindful I'm mindful of the time, and I am seeing someone who's typing.
That is Celeste who's typing. I think a benefit of understanding privilege is that it helps you understand the world around you. Celeste, no wise when you are absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. And she's continuing to type, i.e. how people who are different from you react to you. Yes. And this is fascinating to me, that there's so many of us who don't think about how others react to us. And people who don't think about where the other person is coming from, as Celeste is typing. And unfortunately, I think it's only when people can look outside themselves and not be so centered on trying to get everything for themselves, by themselves, that they start to open up and are willing to have these conversations. If you look back at Maslow's hierarchy, you see that many of us are stuck in the first level, the physiological, and we're just by ourselves trying to breathe, trying to survive. And it's hard to let go and realize that to move up the hierarchy, we have to rely on people who are not us, people who are different than us. And that's a tough thing to teach somebody.
Well, it's countercultural, James, because our culture teaches us to be independent, to just do it on our own. And so I think what you are trying to talk about is relationship, which is a gospel-bearing teaching. Jesus said, the last thing he said was, I love you, love each other, take care of each other. What more or more challenging mandate do we have? And so I'm looking at the time, and I'm seeing that our time is over. So what I would say is thank you, James. I know this has been a challenge because we didn't have our technician with us to help us manage all the technical issues of this webcam web discussion. I'm grateful for the participants. Please let us know what your thoughts are. And I am grateful for the last words about love God and love each other. I think that is the true mandate. Our baptismal covenant calls us to respect the dignity of every human being, but to reach out and love each other. And so that's a huge challenge. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you all for participating, and feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions or there's a topic that you'd like for us to cover in a future webcast.
Good night.
Night
Good
all.
night. Thanks.
So James, I'm still here on the phone.
Okay. I'm going to stop the recording.